Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Shining Sports and Rehabilitative Massage Podcast. We're going to be kind of following up on a few things that we talked about in the last episode and trying to break some of those myths that a lot of us, I think, believe are true. So, last episode, if you guys remember, we were talking about how massage isn't always the direct fix for your muscle tightness, your problems, your weaknesses, whatever. A lot of people sometimes get that in their head where they have to be stuck on one treatment type, and like that's what's supposed to fix them. And I kind of touch base on trying like chiropractic or dry needling, different things that are going to help not just the muscle, but can also help to the deeper root cause of things, or help with the muscles, with the joints, whatever it might be. So to follow on top of that, I think a lot of people, if you ask, everyone has what we call quote unquote tight muscles. And with that, I think that everyone then thinks that like stretching or massage or different things like that is going to cause them to directly fix the problem. That's not always true. So what we kind of have to sit and think about is when we have an injury or we have a muscle, let's say our hamstring, that we injured or just really sore and tight from working out. A lot of us think that stretching is the only thing to do, or one of the smartest things to do. Now, I do agree to some degree, stretching is good, and sometimes it's just misused or it's overused, and that can cause a whole plethora of other problems. But let's say you have a tight hamstring and you go to stretch it and it's already irritated, it's already agitated, and you're trying to lengthen it to its full capacity and try to make it almost like perform its best. So you're trying to really like overly lengthen it, and then what ends up happening is sometimes that can cause something in the nervous system. It can cause the nerve to then kind of start guarding that area more. So we're thinking that we're helping it, but in return we've kind of just made it hypersensitive, and later on it's going to lock down and get even tighter. So sometimes that's not directly the result or what we want to happen. What I tell a lot of my clients sometimes is when we're feeling tight or we're having different things going on, rather than focus so much on like stretching and seeing how far we can take it, more so like enter the range. So for example, if I like had my bed here, I could lift my leg up and kind of sit it on the bed and bring it back down, and come back up, and the same thing, sit it there and bring it back down. And each time I bring that up, I feel a stretch, but I'm not asking my muscle to try to do its best in that stretch. I'm just hitting the range of motion and allowing that fascia and those muscles to gently ease into it. That sometimes is more effective than what we think in our head as like, let's stretch it as far and as hard as we can, because we believe that the more we stretch it, then the more it releases. And that's not always the case, unfortunately. So when you're at home and you're thinking of these different things and you're having issues, that's one thing I think that you guys should be focusing on, is not so much how much can I get out of the muscle, but what can I do to gradually build it up and gradually get that tension and tightness out. And a lot of us want it out like now. So that's why we usually stretch really hard, because we want it to feel better immediately. And I always use the example of like braces. Like you don't get braces on and they're tight and so tight that in a few days you have straight teeth. It's a gradual process. So that way your teeth can appropriately realign. It's the same with the body. We can't just sometimes force things into a certain position. We need to gradually build on top of that so the body gets consistent progress, and with that then you're going to get the results and the things you're looking for. So that's one thing I wanted to touch base on. Another thing, and so sometimes that also goes for like stretching or warming up before a game. So it is good to kind of stretch and warm things up, but I also talk to a lot of people about I'm not big on like isometric stretches, meaning like bending down, touching your toes to stretch out your hamstrings. Reason being is I'm a more functional warm-up type person. I would rather you like do high knees and soldier kicks and walk and move to get those hamstrings. And again, when you do like a soldier kick, you're kicking as high as you can, but as comfortable. Whereas if you're doing like a toe touch, you may be just really overstretching and asking those hamstrings to do a lot more than they need to. And I tell people too, like in football, when does somebody like bend down and touch their toes? So it's like you're still stretching the hamstrings, but you're not functionally stretching. So it's way better in my mind to kind of move around and do different things. And so that can go too for like warming up for people at home. If you're a runner and things like that, sometimes don't focus so much on the isometric holds and how far can I stretch. Think more of an active movement functional, maybe side lunges and things like that. That's going to be a functional stretch as opposed to that isometric stretch. And I think that makes a big difference. There's a man named Gil Headley. He talks a lot about what he calls the fuzz, which is kind of like a fascial buildup that we get overnight. And like for instance, a cat or a baby or child, when you wake them up, they always get this big crazy, stretch and they twist all out. And he describes that stretching and that warm feeling you get as this kind of fuzz melting. And he describes it as it's not something that has to melt by like an excessive force. It's just literally by turning and rotating the joints in a, not a very ergonomical way, but a way that obviously we can contort ourselves to do. And he goes further on to say that he then studied this fascial tissue more and more and kind of realized that it wasn't necessarily the intensity of the stretch or how much we could, the time length of it. It was more so of just entering the range of motion, was decompressing this fascial tissue and bringing enough relief that then the muscle was actually able to reciprocate those feelings. And he was able to like go from not being able to put his hand behind his back to like, praying behind his back. And I have done similar things, and I can do the same exact thing where I can kind of get behind my back and pray with my hands. And it's just because I don't really focus on stretching, but I just focus on hitting different ranges. And by doing that, you create a lot broader feeling on yourself. And then he goes on to say, like, then the older you get, like if you're asking your grandma when the last time she put her arm above her head was, probably been a while for her, and because of that, she might only get like to here. Well, if she had an accident and fell and her arm was to go above her head, there could be, more damage done than if she's someone who wakes up every day and at least can put her arm over her head. Now, she's also not going to be super flexible, but she's going to have her range of motion that you typically lose as you get older. So just these subtle movements and making sure that you're not like waking up in the morning, getting right out of bed, getting in the shower and going to the bathroom. We then eliminate all of that idea that Gil Headley talks about where we're kind of melting this fascia away and not allowing this fuzz to build up overnight. Because this fuzz is it's a very tiny area. It's like a cobweb in a corner. If a spider makes one cobweb overnight, it's not a big deal. But if you leave it sit for 10 years, you're gonna have a very large web. And that's kind of what he describes in this fascial tissue, is this webbing just gets really interlocked and really thick. So we need to make sure we're opening it up. And you see some older people that are like hunchback, or they're like kind of locked into one position. And sometimes this is because maybe their job or home life, whatever, creates them to be in this nonstop rounded position, and they almost get like frozen into it. So making sure that we stretch or kind of move about when we like wake up, and making sure we're hitting different ranges of motion are going to create a much larger base for you moving on when you're trying to continue to build on top of the range of motion, or you're trying just to stay loose and feel better. But this idea sometimes that like the more the stretch, the better isn't always the ideal thing to do. We have to take into account if there's irritability and things, that we don't re-irritate the nerve. I tell some people, if you come in with like a really active trigger point, it's not always good for me just to like hammer it all the way down, because that can just aggravate it more and in return make the muscle tighter. Sometimes you have to start more subtly and then work to the deeper layers later on, might be in the next session or whatever. But we have to treat the body similarly that you would to anything else, like I said, your teeth or whatever, that this has to be a progressional thing, not a right now type thing. So hopefully that kind of helps you guys a little bit at home with that portion of things. We're gonna think of a few more new topics and different things. I had somebody reach out about the NFL Combine process, how that was like, what it was. So I'm gonna make a little video about that and kind of talk about the whole process, how I got into it, who I was working with, and things like that. And then again, if you guys have any questions, any ideas or anything you guys want to hear about specifically, feel free to reach out, and we are looking forward to the next one. Peace.